Omniscient Reader's Viewpoint by Sing Shong. Chapter 508. Have you protected all that you were supposed to protect? Part 1. A man named Yu Hyok was there. From the 0th turn all the way to 1863rd. The history compiled by Yu Hyok overlapped with the ends of his coat and whipped about wildly. As if to speak up for his fable, his words floated up on the final wall. I will never forget. Not even one thing. Fable, Comrade of Life and Death special effect is currently in activation. The fables of the third turn Yu Hyok and the secret of plotters were resonating together. Terrifyingly resplendent powers of chaos extended out from the tip of the dark heavenly demon sword, buried deeply in the wall. The entire wall seemed to grow restless from the disorderly aura of chaos. That was obvious, though. His story should be occupying the most important part of this wall, after all. The protagonist of the 3 ways to survive a destroyed world, Yu Hyok. This whole world couldn't even have gotten started without him in the first place. The Dakibi king spoke up as if to ridicule him. Oh, the puppet of the most ancient dream. Your film is truly lengthy and extensive. He sounded as if he already had predicted this appearance. No one could have accompanied you in your boring and unwieldy story. Even if it was the most ancient dream. Su-chut-chut. Yu Hyok slowly blinked, and the sage's eye was unleashed along with a radiant golden light. His eye glowed brightly as if it had absorbed every starlight existing in this world. The owner of that eye spoke up. Have I come too early this time as well? The moment I heard the secret of plotter, I recalled a certain memory I saw through the disconnected film theory. A memory from the 1863rd turn when he encountered the Dakibi king. Oh, dear unfortunate puppet. You have arrived too early. You can't complete this universe. The Dakibi king tilted his head as that memory was transmitted to him in real time and muttered out. Is that what happened? I see, the me of the different world line told you such a thing. Your manner of speech is different from the one I met. Just like how your regression turns aren't the same, I too am different. The Dakibi king shrugged his shoulders as if he found something rather amusing. Then, he yanked out Yu Hyok's dark heavenly demon sword and threw it back. The latter caught the flying sword with his bare hand. Only the sword scar remained on the final wall, like a cursor. Soon, though, the scar was gradually forced close, and sentences appeared on the wall's surface. However, all these world lines existed for the sake of treading the same path. The Dakibi king addressed Yu Hyok while sounding immensely proud of this story. The completion of the great, noble world is at hand. You shall be able to fulfill your long-cherished wish now. I knew very well what Yu Hyok's wish was. Great fable, Pilgrim of the Lonely Apocalypse, has begun its storytelling. And that was to be freed from the chains of this horrifying curse. The 1863rd turn Yu Hyok only lived on for that very purpose. However, his aim wasn't only that. The secret of plotter turned his head to look at me. The meaning behind that stare was rather obvious. He was telling me not to forget the deal I made with him. I shall kill the culprit of all these worlds. The Dakibi king read that sentence floating above the final wall and muttered out. Kill, is it? How amusing. Do you still believe such a thing is possible? Of course, it is. And to make it possible, a pair of swords were now held in his hands. The pitch-black blade of the dark heavenly demon sword was now joined by the chillingly pale blade of heaven's shaking sword. You, bastard, need to disappear first. Along with a loud kaboom, sparks began pounding the entire wall as if to break it down. An explosion of light occurred right afterwards, revealing 2 figures locked in combat midair. I saw the sturdy barrier-like wall of the fable surrounding the Dakibi king. He was an existence that used the oldest stories in this world as weapons. Great fable, First Messiah, has begun its storytelling. The fable in possession of the master of Nebula Eden was now streaming out from his fingertips. Sentences tightly coagulating, scattered sacred light around. The light from a great constellation was now raining down on all the creations on the ground. There was no doubt that anything touched by that status would melt away without a trace. Dokja SSI. Hyunsong freaked out and hurriedly ran towards where I was. Forged steel extending from his body spread out to protect me and the companions. However, I simply shook my head. There is no need, Hyunsong SSI. Pardon? Instead of a reply, I simply pointed to the front. Even as the pulsing migraine continued to assault me, I didn't stop looking at the view unfolding before my eyes. Other stars were right. I too might be nothing more than a mere constellation. Maybe I endured over a dozen plus years to witness this spectacle. Exclusive attribute, Terror of the Stars, is activating. The brilliant radiance of the Dakibi King was splitting apart. A man wearing a black coat was using two swords to defend against the light of Messiah, capable of ending all evil in this world. Suzuzuzu. The fables on the wall melted down as the light touched them. The secretive plotter, no, Yu Hyuk, was walking forward step by step while scything past that light. Sweat drops formed and dripped down from the end of his chin, and the edges of dark heavenly demon sword and heaven-shaking sword grew increasingly dull from the light, yet he didn't back away, not even once. This caused the Dakibi King's expression to shift gradually. As expected. How about this, then? Great fable, First Evil, has begun its storytelling. The first evil. That was the fable of Baal, the great demon king who had ascended to heaven. It was the absolute power that no good in this world could ever dare to oppose. Now carrying the entirety of the demon world on its back, the Dakibi King dropped a pitch-black bolt of lightning on Yu Hyuk. It was the thunderclap from the corrupted heaven that no archangel could withstand. Isiolwa cried out in the distance. Yu Hyuk SSI. Yu Hyuk didn't avoid the incoming lightning bolt. No, he instead raised his sword up like a lightning rod and faced the attack head-on. That wasn't the end, however. The stage transformation is activating. Through the stage transformation, souls of demon kings were being revived. There were some that died by our hands, while some were killed off by the apocalypse dragon. All demon kings had been summoned to the battlefield once more by the first evil, and they were now howling towards Yu Hyuk and me. Guaa. The weapons thrown by the demon kings were enveloped in the malevolent magical energy, creating a purple-colored storm of lightning. It was so powerful that not even a myth-grade constellation would be able to withstand it. As the lightning flooded in, Yu Hyuk's pale face was illuminated like an evil apparition. He remained utterly calm even as the ominous storm of status raged on. Just like someone who had been waiting for this very moment for a long time. They are all bastards that I've killed before. Exclusive attribute, Demon Kingslayer, is activating. Yu Hyuk leapt into the air and marched forward while deflecting the incoming weapons. Everywhere his swords drew arcs, fables of evil crumbled down. Like a monster born only to destroy, he swung his swords again and again. Every single one of his sword strikes contained the resentment of the worlds he had lived in. Suchachachuchit. A huge rift was opening up in the corrupted skies of the demon world. The martial prowess powerful enough to dissolve the stage transformation all by himself, the monster created by Starstream was now working towards destroying Starstream itself. Guak. The blade of dark heavenly demon sword cut off the head of the revived black mane lion Marba, while the heaven-shaking sword's trajectory pierced past the heart of the merciless hunter going against heaven's will, Barbados. No demon king could announce themselves as a king in front of this man. The Dakibi King growled and shouted out as if he too had finally acknowledged the threat. You arrogant puppet! You are not the protagonist of this world line. At the same time, the surrounding terrain began changing again. Great Fable, Starstream game system, has begun its storytelling. The stage transformation is activating. The wall's appearance was changing as if pixels were breaking apart. Yu Hyuk's figure seemingly grew smaller and smaller. The path he needed to tread became a maze, as if he was now trapped within the maze of Deadless. Even a monster with a large mouth chasing after him could be seen, too. Automated turrets, suddenly popping from here and there, began firing at him, while the ground his feet landed on morphed into a deep quagmire. It was as if he had entered a video game. Yu Hyuk was laughing. Exclusive attribute, Ruler of Games, is activating. He overcame the exceedingly simple traps and flung himself forward like an arrow. He tore the approaching monster's head off, then proceeded to utterly destroy the maze's walls. As if he already knew the method of clearing this world, he didn't even permit a single attack to land on him. Applicable stage cannot deal with the target's status. The maze collapsed, and Yu Hyuk was already standing right before the Dakibi King. The latter's eyes were now dyed in the colors of fluster. Is that all? It was only obvious why the secretive plotter would win against the Dakibi King, however. His whole life existed solely to fight and win against Starstream. He must have killed the Dakibi King in a similar manner during the portion of the original I didn't get to read. The latter was hastily retreating, his eyes now shifting towards me. What is Yu Hyuk's weakness? The moment I read that sentence floating above the final wall, the back of my neck grew icy cold. The sights of a different world line were projected onto the Dakibi King's irises. Memories not from this world, but another world line was currently entering him. He stopped looking at me as if he had found the right answer, and with a chilling smile, shifted his gaze back to Yu Hyuk. Oh, dear puppet. Is your mind as sharp as your sword, I wonder? The King of Stories is forcibly reproducing your fable. The stage transformation is activating temporarily. The similarity of the surrounding terrain is greatly enhancing the level of stage's reproduction. Corpses of demon kings were strewn about everywhere. Yu Hyuk and his devastated expression standing on top of dead constellations and demon kings, was now slowly taking in the surroundings. The final world he used to live in was now unfolding in this place. There was no way he didn't recognize this world. It was none other than the secretive plotter himself who had sent me to that place, after all. The 1863rd regression turn. The last world of the ways of survival. The Dakibi King approached Yu Hyuk like an encroaching shadow as the latter dazedly looked up at the sky. No, he was no longer the Dakibi King. With every step he took, his face and his silhouette changed. The pale cheeks, two eyes gleaming like stars, were now looking at him. The white coat perfectly matching mine was dancing in the wind. Do you remember it? Back in the 33rd regression turn. Wadi Jihai said after clearing the 40th scenario. A voice exactly the same as mine was now speaking up. Sparks danced in the air as Yu Hyuk's body froze up stiffly. The Dakibi King easily reached out and grabbed hold of Yu Hyuk's collars before continuing on. Now, remember. You weren't always unhappy, right? In all the regression turns, there were always moments of happiness, even if they didn't last long. Both the heaven-shaking sword and the dark heavenly demon sword trembled powerfully. And in the midst of the tremor, they drooped powerlessly. The regression depression. That was the only weakness of Yu Hyuk, who had repeatedly regressed for a very long time. In the 173rd turn, you managed to protect Earth for a pretty long time. You got to see Jihai receive her high school diploma, and you even got to see Seolwa smile with another's child in her arms. The light in Yu Hyuk's eyes was wavering. It wasn't despair that could defeat Yu Hyuk. Small feather-like memories settled down inside his head one by one. The Dakibi King was using the exact same method I relied on back then. The breathing got harder, and the lungs were getting tighter. A man drowning in water would sink even deeper under the surface from the weight of a mere feather. I couldn't afford to idly watch on anymore. I shouted at Yu Hyuk, telling him to wake up, and not to fall for such an illusion. However, my voice couldn't reach them as if a non-conductive barrier was set up between us. And the Dakibi King was smiling away, perhaps to mock this entire story. Yu Hyuk, Have you protected all that you wanted to protect? Slowly, Yu Yonghyok's knees sank down. I roused the status of fables. I needed to undo that stage transformation right now, but how should I? Grab. There was a hand still tightly clutching mine. It was Han Suyang. That's not a battle you can interfere in. But, if he's left alone. Even a star that can't be seen still emits light. You said that, right? A star that can't be seen? Her words made me look back at Yu Yonghyok once more. His gaze being lowered had come to a stop. Blinding sparks were completely enveloping him. Su-chu-chu-chu-chu. Something was waking up his fading consciousness. Great fable, ones that remember the apocalypse, has begun its storytelling. That was a fable I wasn't aware of. As the sparks lessened gradually, several silhouettes revealed themselves. Now that I took a closer look, Yu Yonghyok wasn't alone. No, for others were standing beside him. A tall man, a young man with blonde hair, a girl with a ponytail, and finally, he couldn't protect anyone. That's why he now stands in this place. An archangel with blindingly pure wings. Astonishment quickly dyed the Dakibi king's expression. The fable from the destroyed 999th turn was now burning brightly like the conflagration of end times on the edges of the archangel's blade. Because he believes there are still things left to protect. Chapter 509. Have you protected all that you were supposed to protect? Part 2. The Dakibi king's brows quivered. The fables from the 999th regression turn were now looming before him. The fables discarded by Starstream had begun telling their stories one by one. They were waking Yu Yonghyok up from the depth of regression depression. The Dakibi king frowned deeply next. Why are you here? Did you not make a deal with me? You don't have a pretext to help him. Sentences began floating up above the final wall. We made a deal with the Dakibi king, you see? If we destroy this world line, he will send us back. He will get in touch with your sponsor, the most ancient dream, and... Those were the words of the 999th turn E.G. High. The Dakibi king spoke once more. It was I who summoned you all to this world. Do you wish to be cast out of the world line again? I ask you, do you wish to taste the everlasting pain while wandering the horrifying gap between dimensions without an end in sight? His words continued on as if to threaten them. This Yu Yonghyok is the enemy you've been searching for. He's the very culprit who destroyed your world line, the one who thrust your fables into misery. There was a slight hint of agitation on the expressions of the outer gods. The Dakibi king was right, just like how it was with Yu Yonghyok, they too came this far to settle the score from the world they used to live in. It was then, someone opened his mouth. What dog's head are you yapping on about? It's you, asshole, who dropped us into this damn game, isn't it? If the scenarios didn't start in the first place, would I even be standing here doing this shit? The monarch of the Great Abyss, 999th turns Kim Nam-woon, spoke with a thuggish attitude. As if he had already finished making up his mind, truly incredible power of chaos was being unleashed from his entire figure. Great fable, delusional design, has begun its storytelling. Kuyu, it's been so long since we fought together. Kim Nam-woon cackled as he undid the bandages from his hands. He was a monster that even surpassed his own sponsor, Abyssal Black Flame Dragon. His pitch-black obsidian hand, filled to the brim with thicker, more evil aura than anything Han Suyang could ever produce, began sucking in the Starstream-s night. Great fable, heart-sealing the sorrow, has begun its storytelling. Right behind him, there was another man raising his huge figure up as well. It was the 999th Turnzi Hyansong, the king of Silverlight Heart. The completed fable metal armor wrapped around his entire figure. Dakibi king, I'm excluded from that deal since I have never agreed to it. Next up, the master of the sunken island, 999th Turnzi Jihai, summoned her gigantic battleship up in the air. Great fable, wanderer of the eternal horizon, has begun its storytelling. The atmosphere of the great ocean could be felt from her twin dragon sword. She wordlessly unsheathed her sword and protected Yu Yunghayak's right side. With that, the king's decision became clear. Exclusive skill, Omniscient Reader's Viewpoint, is forcibly activating. Their thoughts and determination were being transmitted to me in full. They all hated this secretive plotter. However, that hatred was born out from the deep-seated yearning they all held. No one treasured Yu Yunghayak as much as them in any of the universes out there. It was all thanks to Yu Yunghayak that they got to reach this far. To make sure they would reach here, the 999th turns Yu Yunghayak sacrificed everything of him. His arm was cut off, his legs were torn off, he lost both of his eyes, and in the end, he even sacrificed his life, too. It was Yu Yunghayak who saved them and killed them. They only lived for Yu Yunghayak. How could people like them ever forget about him? The wrath that had to be chained within the sinking island, the sorrow that could only be endured after turning your heart into steel, the pain that could only be forgotten by throwing yourself into the abyss. Great fable, Flame of Eternity, has begun its storytelling. And the ache that could only be appeased by burning oneself away. They repeatedly connected the film that threatened to be cut off at any time, and eventually reached the final pages of the story. Step aside, Dakibi King. We only want one thing. The 999th turns Uriel, the living flame, spoke up. And that is to witness the end we didn't get to confirm back in our world line. At the end of her words, the flames of conflagration moved. Kwa 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 kwa. The hell flame that utterly devastated the Nyas forest was now burning the interior of the wall. Almost at the same time, the right hand of the 999th turns Kim Nam-woon stabbed into the Dakibi King's thigh. Ha ha ha. Let's kill a Dakibi for a change. Kim Nam-woon's madness-filled stigma sliced past the time and space, destroyed fables, and aimed at the Dakibi King's figure. The two exchanged the exact amount of fables during their attacks and defenses. Weapons created from the delusion grew out of Kim Nam-woon's right arm, while star relics summoned by the Dakibi King appeared from several spots of the wall and blocked off the former's weapons. Psu-cha-cha-chat. The final wall was the location where the Dakibi King's fable could display the greatest level of power. With the stage being what it was, the direction of the battle soon flowed disadvantageously for Kim Nam-woon. Oh, the spear that rips the oceans apart and draws the borders in the seas. Oh, the arrow that shot down the eye of the sun. Sentences leaking out from several spots on the wall soon became reality. Shu-sha-sha-shuk. The star relics matched the Dakibi King's signal and flew in, turning the entire figure of the monarch of the Great Abyss into Swiss cheese. A spear stabbed into his thigh, while the arrow pierced into his arm. However, even as the pitch-black fable dripped out from him, Kim Nam-woon was grinning. Go! Taekwon Hyeonsong. Along with Kim Nam-woon's cry, a figure taking the spot behind him rose up. Kwa-do-do-do-do. It was the 999th Turnzi Hyeonsong. His powerful, sturdy arms wrapped tightly around the Dakibi King, then forged steel occupying the space, grew out from his entire body. As the powerful sparks exploded, the steel tightly secured the Dakibi King's arms and legs. Jihaya. At the end of the 999th turn Hyeonsong's signal, the master of the sunken island made her move. Load the cannon. A massive battleship floating in the night sky could be spied within the wall's gap, created by the impact with the arc. Along with a powerful whirlpool swirling about, something was being loaded in front of the ship. The status emitted from there was more than enough to blow up a planet in its entirety. When taking a closer look, it was not a shell that had been loaded into the gigantic cannon. Fire! And while issuing a huge explosion noise, a shooting star fired out from the ship. It was the living flame, descending like a star, with a blindingly bright tail behind her back. She had willingly become a bullet and now was flying straight at the Dakibi King. The 999th turns Uriel shot forward in a shocking turn of speed while melting everything getting in her way. The 999th turn's fable concentrated on the tip of her sword, began burning up violently. It's not only the conquering king that have killed you before. This was the method the 999th turn's characters used to clear the final pages. The incandescent sun shattered the wall's exterior and advanced forward. Fables clinging onto the final wall writhed in pain from that incredible heat. This was the attack that no one in this world line could possibly defend against. Yet, the Dakibi King was doing exactly that against such an attack. Kriaowick dash. The Dakibi King's eyes glowed sharply under the hellish heat. Ah, Aia. Countless stigmata engraved on his body screeched out. They were texts seemingly taken from the final wall. Great fables began directing their exaltation towards them. Even the fables in my possession were getting agitated, as well. The modifier, King of the Stories, was not just for a show. The king of the stories that existed at the peak of Starstream. His face looked noble, evil, beautiful, and sorrowful all at the same time. Once upon a time he too was a human. The weapons pouring out from the final wall collided with the flames of conflagration, and he was a demon. The ash-colored fable leaking out from the Dakibi King's horn stopped the approaching Uriel's movement. He was a savior, and the divine light emitted from white wings restored the Dakibi King's stamina. And eventually, an existence that became a Dakibi. The unending fables began enveloping him. As if this world couldn't end in this place. This place was not the 999th turn. I sensed the 999th turn's characters now shifting their gazes in my direction. Now, make your move. You must be the one to finish it. You haven't forgotten your promise with us, yes? Unfortunately, I couldn't move. Great Fable, Guardian of the World, has begun its storytelling. Great Fable, Guardian of the World, is now looking at the next Guardian. Because the Dakibi King's fable was also looking directly at me. Kim Dokja. The Dakibi King shouted in my direction. Do not go against your predetermined destiny. You love the fables more than anyone in this world. I too was like you. I understand the feelings you have towards this world better than anyone in this universe. The fable extending from his body reached out towards me. Han Suyang next to me covered my ears and growled angrily. Don't listen to him. It's not even worth it hearing him out. Zhang Huiwen and Yi Hyansong stood before me, while Yu Seng'a, Xing Yusung, and Yi Gilyong stood around me to protect me. And from behind my back, the howl from Yi Jihai's sword resounded out. All the stars in the nebula Kim Dokja Company are shining brightly. However, there were some things that would become more visible the harder you tried to obscure them. Some words would become clearer the more you tried to cover them up. Exclusive skill, Omniscient Reader's Viewpoint, is going out of control. Black Flame Dragon. Black Flame Dragon. God damn it, open your eyes already. Kim Yushin. Wake up. Our Wangsanbil is not yet. Great Sage. Those were fables streaming on the final wall. Constellations were collapsing on the battlefield where an even fiercer battle than ours was taking place. Fables were endlessly leaking out from the great sage's body, now tattered to resemble a torn rag. As if he had lost both of his eyes, his once blinding golden gaze fiery eyes were currently not emitting any light. I can't see my Magne all that well. Uriel was supporting him. The archangel with both of her wings torn off held his hand and stroked the nightscape. He's alive. There he is, still shining. The constellation still doggedly surviving until now rushed towards them from among the chaotic night sky. The scene then changed to show Persephone embracing the fallen Hades. He was trying to say something, but she simply shook her head. Do not worry, my ancient knight. Olympus' sun was setting above her head. All these endings became wretched sentences and rushed above the wall. These sentences were being written only for the purpose of finishing them off. Do you not wish to save them? I felt vomit rising up from the deepest part of my body. The Dakibi King shouted out. The current you can't save them. The one who loves the story can never change that very story. Can't change it, because you loved it. Only the one who overcomes the story, the one who understands the trivial nature of everything, can escape from the suppression of the probability. The surrounding storm of aftermaths was growing even more vicious, accompanied by the kagagagak noise. The power of the fables flowing out from the Dakibi King was gradually overwhelming the combined might of the 999th turn's characters. The Dakibi King tore off Hyansong's fable medal and extended his hand in my direction. The one single fable you have compiled is more than enough to inherit the position of Starstream. Take my hand. What you want is the same as what I want. I do not wish to see the stories of those stars be erased. His voice even sounded desperate, too. The light in his eyes and his fable all acted as proof of his sincerity. The Starstream's fable glowed brightly from his figure. The story he had been reading for a long time had eventually become a part of him. He was now the Starstream itself. He genuinely didn't want this story to end. Continue with this story. Become the protagonist of a new world line, and along with the fable you have created, continue the banquet of the most ancient dream. You are the existence born solely for that purpose. You were able to reach this far, only for that purpose. While listening to those words, I began recalling all the lucky moments that happened to me so far. Starstream is looking at you. Why was the Starstream's probability so generous towards me? The Dakibi King's fable was telling me the reason for that. The lights continued to explode before my eyes. Do not forget what you truly want. You're not the last verse. No, you're the eternity. The constellation's fables streamed behind the Dakibi King. He was right. I didn't wish for those stories to end. The great sage, heaven's equal, watched the falling star and sensed his own approaching demise. I slowly turned my head around and saw Yu Yunghyak, now almost freed from the regression depression. His seemingly empty eyes were locked on me. However, there were some stories that had to end. Chapter 510. Have you protected all that you were supposed to protect? Part 3. That was an old promise. I'll finish your story for you. I couldn't keep that promise during the 1863rd turn. Your has begun shaking unsteadily. I pushed myself up while gripping the unbreakable faith tightly. The hilt of the sword that accompanied me from beginning till now through almost all the scenarios could be felt in my hand. The tip of the sword touched the ground and sentences began rising up. Sentences that I had never seen before. He was more curious about the end of this world than anyone, and more than anyone else, he wished for this world not to end. My last fable had begun. Kim Dokja? I removed Han Suyang's hands, covering my ears. Her eyes were trembling. My reddened appearance was reflected in her irises. A lengthy wound was running across my cheek, wings were torn, and the Demon King's horn was broken. I was truly in a mess. And Han Suyang believed in such a mess of a man until now, and came this far. Have you made up your mind? The Dakibi King in the center of all the exploding sparks asked me. The beings from the 999th turn, the Outer God Kings, were doing whatever they could to fight back. The battle so far had been evenly matched, but judging from the direction of the storm of the probabilities aftermath blowing in, it should be the 999th side falling into a disadvantage in the end. That's right. I replied to the Dakibi King. I shall cross the final wall. And then, meet the one behind it. The culprit of all these tragedies, the most ancient dream. I'll meet that guy, and stop all of this world's tragedies. The Dakibi King grinned as if he was satisfied with my decision. Indeed. Very good. That's eminently possible when you become my successor. Now, come this way. Hurry, and inherit the Starstream's will. I never said I'll take you up on your offer. I activated Way of the Wind and the Lightning Transformation at the same time. This world's fastest movement technique was soon enveloped by the pure white electrical energy, transforming my body into a single streak of light beam. With the fastest speed I could ever produce, I shot past both the Dakibi King and the outer gods. The destination I chose was the deepest part of the final wall. You. I heard the stunned voice of the Dakibi King. I also saw the sentences dashing across above the final wall in the distance. The place where the abyssal black flame dragon's last scale and Uriel's last feather had fallen. I roared out in panic and dashed towards that very sentence. The place where Persephone's last teardrop had fallen. I needed to stop those sentences from finishing. Even if I saw the end of this world, I must never let those words come to an end. Perhaps he had realized my intentions. The Dakibi King was shouting out in sheer astonishment. No, stop. You are not a permitted being yet. You can't even touch that wall, let alone cross it. Su-cha-cha-chat. The moment he was finished, the storm of the probabilities aftermath suppressed my entire body. The sparks exploded with enough force to utterly crush my incarnation body right down its atoms, and for a moment there, the inside of my head blanked out from the pain. The final wall is rejecting your approach. The wall was rejecting me. It was stopping me from touching its sentences, to change them, and even from crossing over it. As if I couldn't even be permitted to reach it at all. In an instant, the words on the wall widened the space, and retreated to a far-off distance. Those sentences weren't Kim Dokja's. Powerful gusts of wind knocked me off my feet. I was like some words cast out to the distant empty blankness, miserably rolling on the ground towards my rear. Then, my back collided with something while issuing a loud thud. You idiot. You think you can achieve something by rushing out all alone? It was Han Suyang. I replied to her with a grin. I wasn't rushing forward alone. The Kim Dokja Company's members were running towards us from behind. I didn't want to lose anyone. I simply couldn't afford to lose anyone. Dokja SSI. Keep running. Zhang Huiwen, her hour of judgment activated, rushed towards us while scattering the reddish glow from her eyes. Yi Hyansong and Yi Jihai were positioned either side of her, while Yu Sangha and the kids were right behind them. Meanwhile, Zhang Haiyang and our masters were taking up the rear of the group. Take this with you. It's the last life and death pill. Yi Seolwa couldn't come with us because of Gong Pildu, so she threw the pillbox at us, instead. I took a life and death pill out right away and swallowed it. My wrecked incarnation body began recovering rapidly. Stop. Along with the Dakibi King's cry, bizarre-looking creatures revealed themselves from among the contexts of the paragraphs recorded on the wall. They were outer gods, too, beings that hadn't earned fables worthy enough to be recorded on the wall. Black small square 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 black small square. Not all outer gods followed their kings. There definitely existed some that chose to become the Dakibi King's underlings despite possessing great powers themselves, and voluntarily worked as the slaves of the scenarios. Kwa 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 kwa. Stop them. If you do, I shall record your fables on the final wall. Our martial art masters discovered tentacles rushing in from all directions and unsheathed their weapons. Leave this place to us. The Breaking the Sky Saints, Breaking the Sky Swordsmanship, and Kyrios's purest sword force combined into a single ray of light and engraved their sentences over the wall. Great Fable, the first Murim, has begun its storytelling. Two greatest experts of Murim stopped the tentacles and a desperate struggle soon ensued. Unfortunately, the time they could buy was only for a fleeting moment. There were simply far too many outer gods flooding out from the context the Dakibi King had opened up. All fables of Kim Dokja Company are emitting bright light. We couldn't afford to waste the time our masters bought for us. The wall's surface recording Uriel's and the great sage's fables had already grown that far away. There could only be one answer. We needed to approach it fast than its retreating speed. But, how could we? It was right around then a certain paragraph floated up on the final wall. To think that a green zone is located on a wall. To begin with, people were responsible for attaching the concept of rooms on it, weren't they? I abruptly looked down at the floor we were standing on. The floor itself was another type of wall, laying in a different direction. And our footprints were left engraved on the wall we ran on. The fables we had compiled were floating up on the footprints we left behind. By the way, Dokja SSI, what are you so focused on reading just now? It was the moment when my life's genre changed. The number of people remaining in the subway cabin is 12. And there are only 3 insects inside the net. One world was dying, while a new world was being born. And I was the sole reader who knew the conclusion of this world. It was from the first scenario. Back when we were trying to escape from the subway. Please select your backer. Your chosen backer will become your trusty sponsor from now on. Constellation, demon-like judge of fire, is disappointed in you. Constellation, prisoner of the golden headband, is amused by your choice. Those were from this. We began running again. The fables created the path we should be running on. Is it true that you're monopolizing the food? Stand up, everyone. The scenario has just begun, after all. An arrogant tenant showed up, I see. Hyansong SSI, do it now. Destroy everything, please. Past the battles of Gumho and Chunmuro stations, and I'm the 9th quitter. My apologies, but may I inquire what your name is? I'm Yu Hyok. The memories from the battles of the Capture the Flag and the life and death struggle of the prophets were remembered next. What an amusing thing this is. All this history belongs to the past, yet why have you all gathered in this place once more? That bastard is nicknamed the Tyrant King. Doesn't matter whether you're a man or woman, you'll be taken as a concubine if you're pretty enough, and if you're not, either you'll be killed off or become his slave. In that case, Dokja SSI, you'll end up as a slave if you get caught. The top dog among the Soul 7 kings was, of course, the conquering king Yu Hyok. We greeted the Guangwoman's Battle of the Kings, and that's why I will not sit down on the absolute throne. And I destroyed the absolute throne. However, I won't permit anyone else to sit down on this throne either. Every moment had been a battle against adversity. Not one scenario was easy, and we always had to risk our lives and fight the odds. All these tragedies had become a story in the end. And we were running with that story. Fables untangling endlessly like a ball of threads soon formed a single image. That image soon morphed into a white tiger. A white tiger sporting noble whiskers and stripes was now running beside me. Fable, king of a kingless world, is seeing you off on your journey. The king of a kingless world, my nativity fable, was seeing me off. The white tiger created the path we must tread on and roared out loudly, before coming to a sudden stop, as if the road from here on wasn't its to create, its yearning eyes chasing after my path. Fable, one who opposes the miracles, is seeing you off on your journey. Before long, my second fable, taking on the figure of a blue hawk, was flying above my head. It was the fable I earned by killing the returnee Mian Il Sang, who descended as the calamity of questions. Fable, one who scorned the storyteller, is seeing you off on your journey. Our every fable was enabling us to run on the final wall. The expressions of my companions also changed as their own fables appeared. Yi Hyansong hesitantly looked behind over and over again, while Shin Yusung couldn't hold it anymore and broke down in tears. This was the road they had lived on, and the story they need to finish. Fable, one who hunted the king of disasters, is seeing you off on your journey. The fable I earned by hunting the shadow of Yamato no Orochi back in the Peaceland, a gigantic shadow of a snake was supporting the road we were running on. Every single one of them was a precious story to us. We lived all those moments to their fullest, and that's why all of us were here now. Suchachachuchit. Our fables lost their strengths and collapsed as the storm of aftermaths grew harsher and harsher. Fable, one who murdered the outer god, is seeing you off on your journey. A fable resembling a massive squid protected us from the aftermath storm. Fable, demon king of salvation, has begun telling its last story. With every ounce of energy I could muster, I wielded the unbreakable faith. We shook off the incoming outer gods and dashed towards the final wall. The fables of the constellations were still telling their stories in the distance even now. The flame of conflagration fell out from Uriel's hand. In that last moment, she looked up at a certain star shining in the night sky. And then, it was still not too late. Uriel, the abyssal black flame dragon, and even the great sage, they were all still alive. This story could be changed. The final wall is not permitting your approach. We only had to go a little bit further. Access prevention process has been initialized. And then, our steps came to a halt. Right before our eyes stood thin, transparent walls layered one after another. Each wall was made up with incredible density. We struck it several times, but its sturdiness couldn't be broken through the powers of individual fables. We could now see the outer gods ignoring our masters and rushing towards us. The Dakibi king seemed to be relieved now as he shouted something at us, too. I ignored them all and looked up at the night sky. All the stars of the universe had dimmed, but that didn't mean every single of them did. A ripple-like thing spread out from a certain spot in the night sky. The first one to realize what was going on was Han Suyang. She rubbed her eyes hard and muttered out, "He's way too late." The front section of a train could be seen dashing towards us. Surya's sun train was rushing in our direction as the ark's debris could be seen bouncing off its hull. Constellation, supreme god of light, is incarnating into the final scenario's location. Apologies for my tardiness, demon king of salvation. He had finally attained the status of a myth grade, and arrived in this stage by crossing the night sky. Not at all. You are just in time. Great fable, Demon World Spring, has begun its storytelling. Finally, the condition for the beginning/GI had been satisfied. The stage transformation is activating. Chapter 511. Have you protected all that you were supposed to protect? Part 4. The night sky momentarily turned pure white from Surya's sunlight. Just like how we fought together back in the Demon King selection battles as well as in the Gigantomachia, Surya's train was rushing towards us. We'll pay the train fare later. With Han Suyang shouting out pompously as our lead, we got on Surya's train. An incredible explosion of sparks occurred at the train's wheels. The vehicle did a huge donut once in the air while emitting loud noises, before shooting straight towards the transparent wall as sonic booms exploded out from its rear. Hyansong shouted out, "It's breaking!" Along with the loud "Krayak," the transparent walls began crumbling down. We continued to break past the layers of walls and dashed forward. The final wall, recording the fables of the constellations, was gradually getting closer. The Dakibi King's loud roar was messily intermingling with the fables from the 999th turn. Constellation, supreme god of light, is unleashing all of his status. Surya's entire body as he sat in the engine room glowed brightly like a white-hot incandescent sun. Fables dripped out from the wounds visible all over his body. Maybe, he too had already paid a hefty price to reach this place. Constellation supreme god of lights is final engineer. Even then, his fable didn't stop. Without showing anything outwardly, he used his own body as fuel to operate the sun train. As if that was his duty as the one who lived until now as the supreme god of light. Great fable, Demon World Spring, is seeing you off on your journey. The power output still isn't enough. Despite his fierce will burning throughout his entire body, the train's speed was gradually slowing down. It was all because the closer we got to the center of the final wall, the thicker the density of the protective walls became. And just before the wall seemingly made out of net of texts collided against the front of the train, Zhang Huiwan made her move. "Leave it to me. Hui1SSI? Ek." The moment she grabbed Hyansong's neck tightly, his body shrunk down rapidly and eventually transformed into a steel sword. And this weapon's blade was soon burning hotly in the flames of the hellfire. Great fable, torch that swallowed the myth, is seeing you off on your journey. Development/sung. The fable that illuminated the battlefield of Gigantomachia was now glowing brightly to scorch the final wall. Qua 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 qua. Truly a stupendous amount of flames gushed out from the front of the train, enveloping the frontal surface of the vehicle in intense heat. Zhang Huiwen, releasing hellfire from her entire body, shouted out in a voice seemingly sizzling in lava. Fable, Schmeeble. It's all going to end right here. Every time her sword glowed brightly, the net of texts was torn apart. She wielded her sword over and over again. Even as the sparks from the aftermath storm ravaged her, she didn't forget to improve further upon her way of the sword. This was the path Zhang Huiwen's life had created. We were running on this path. However, it was still not enough. We needed a much stronger power than this. The sentences on the final wall were unfolding in the distance. In that final moment, Uriel reached out towards the sky. My fable might come to an end today, but there will be a star that shall never forget this story. Great fable, season of light and darkness, is seeing you off on your journey. The fable of both Uriel and the abyssal black flame dragon crossed the wall to be transmitted. The fables of good and evil collided energetically and protected us, and wings made out of texts sprouted from the sides of the train. Just like a roaring apocalypse dragon, the vehicle devoured the walls before our eyes and continued to advance forward. Stop. The Dakibi king began chasing after us even before we realized it. Fables flooded out from his arms and legs, and despite the 999th turn's individuals pursuing him, he still extended his arm towards us. Suchachachuchit. The probabilities sparks exploded out from the floor, shaking the train's central axis. The vehicle shook hard, and just as it was about to lose its balance, more sentences floated up above the final wall. The great sage watched the thunder spear fly towards his neck and spoke up. Don't stop, Magnaya. The great sage, heaven's equal who never yielded right up until his final moments, was there. At the same time, a man wearing a black coat riding at the rear of the train stood up. Yu Yunghayok. The secretive plotter possessing Yu Yunghayok raised his hand to the air. When he did, countless outer gods rose up from amidst the storm of aftermaths occurring on the floor. They weren't the regular nameless ones either. Great fable, liberator of the forgotten ones, is seeing you off on your journey. Go 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 go. We'll help, we'll help, we'll help, we'll help. Didn't forget, didn't forget, didn't forget, didn't forget. The nameless ones that helped us or fought against us during the journey to the west propped up the rocking train. As if this vehicle was a ship riding on the rough waters of the Tongtian River, they were carrying us towards the final wall. You have approached the core of the final wall. Eventually, all the walls protecting the final wall crumbled down. The train was damaged everywhere, and Surya must have had blacked out as he was no longer releasing his fable. Not too far away, we could see the real, final wall. A wall far thicker and expansive than any other I had ever seen. This is the wall that I couldn't cross. The secretive plotter spoke up. Is it also not doable this time too? That was the final moment for the 58th turn Yu Yunghayok. I made a mistake. But, during the next turn, the 96th turn, Yu Yunghayok closed his eyes in that manner. Countless ends for Yu Yunghayok streamed by above the wall. It wasn't just him, though. The last hero of Wangsanbil, Gaibeek, continued to shake his eternal rival who'd never wake up again. Goryeo #1 swordsman and the maritime war god, having lost an arm each, stood back to back and unleashed their final statuses. The wall that recorded the endings of all the constellations. The last moments of all the constellations that included Uriel and the Great Sage were being recorded on the wall in real time. The companions and I disembarked from the unmoving train and dashed towards the wall. If only those sentences were erased, and if all those tragedies could be stopped. You can't interfere with the final wall's sentences. Applicable paragraphs are prohibited from being overwritten. Please input the cancellation code. The secretive plotter spoke up. No regular methods will work. I've already used physical force before, but couldn't destroy this wall. Zhang Huiwan shouted out. We came this far, so there must be. From here on, it's your job. He was now looking at me. Somewhere within that gaze was the third turn Yu Young Hyox, who had completed the scenarios alongside me. What exactly is the conclusion you wish to see? This was what I needed to do in order to answer that question. E.G. Hai opened her mouth. He couldn't do it even after 1863 lifetimes, so. Juicy, can you really do it? It was as she said. I was not a protagonist like Yu Young Hyok, nor was I a writer like Han Suyong. However, because I was neither the protagonist nor the writer, maybe there was something only I could do. Maybe, I could remember that one thing that the protagonist couldn't see, and the writer had forgotten all about. The job that only him could do, him that read the ways of survival for a very, very long time. I quietly stared into the final wall. I focused all my attention and read the wall's surface again and again. Not too long after that, the wall radiated brilliantly. Just like a certain screen in the past that I had been reading over and over again. 3 ways to survive the destroyed world. Everything from that epic tale was being established within me. I hadn't yet read the final revised version of the ways of survival, which meant I didn't know how the story was supposed to end. However, oh, dear unfortunate puppet. You have come far too early. I'm sorry, but beyond here doesn't exist yet. The 1863rd turns Dakibi King from the Secret of Plotter's Memories said that. But, what if all these were handed over to me without having been written yet? My companions and I rushed towards the wall. What if someone wanted me to complete this story? Exclusive skill, reading comprehension, is activating beyond the limit. My overheating head felt like it'd explode, but I kept my eyes wide open and continued to glare at the wall. The fables written on the final wall. Those fables were connecting with each other inside my head. I saw how each fable was connected to another. I saw the cleverly installed narrative devices within the fables, and then, the context surrounding them. Those that did appear in the novel, but had never been used until its end. When that happened, the previously perfect-looking story began showing gaps within it. Gaps that hadn't been filled. Things that would be collected as time passed by. Things that were waiting for this story's epilogue. Kim Dokja knew exactly what that was. You have awakened a new attribute. Attribute, for Shadow Collector, is activating. The story's gaps that only I could have discovered, someone who watched this tale as a reader, from the beginning till its end. I stared at the 5 gaps visible on the expansive wall's surface. Hyang. Leave it to me. The first one to step up was Zhang Hyang. She accurately placed her palm on the wall's gap that I pointed out. The wall of impossible communication has discovered its intended position. The final wall's first theme has been completed. Along with the explosion of blinding light, the wall's fragment slotted back in its spot, and then, a single sentence leaked out from there. This tale was a story about an impossible communication. Huiwan SSI, Gilyang. Zhang Huiwan and Yi Gilyang nodded their heads and placed their palms on their own gaps. Then, the 2 portions of the wall that divides the good and evil became one. The wall that divides the good and evil has discovered its intended position. The final wall's second theme has been completed. This tale was a story about indistinguishable good and evil, and now, it was Yu Seng's turn. Yu Seng SSI. She slowly walked forward, found her gap, and reached out. The wall that decides samsara has discovered its intended position. The final wall's third theme has been completed. And, this tale was a story about a tragedy locked in a cycle. With that, 4 gaps had been filled, leaving the last one. I looked up at that empty spot. The last fragment of the final wall. That was the fragment that never appeared in the original novel. Kim Dokja. The 4th wall was addressing me. The 4th wall. Both it and I knew exactly what we needed to do here. A blinding fragment made up of texts floated up above my palm. Those texts were now talking to me. Ilika ori. I couldn't say anything. While unable to say anything, I ran towards that last empty gap and slotted the fragment inside. This tale was a story of a reader who wanted to change its conclusion. Right next moment, an incredible shower of sparks exploded from the wall. The code has been lifted. The wall's authority was opening up towards me. The secrets of the wall that even Yu Young-hyuk couldn't cross was now streaming into me. The sentence of the constellations floated up right before my eyes. It was the last sentence of the great sage and Uriel that I wanted to stop so badly. The blades flying in at the necks of the great sage and Uriel. I powerfully grabbed that sentence. Suchachachuchit. It felt like my hand was set on fire. Fables clung onto me and stabbed into my hand like sharp blades. However, I held on. I couldn't let this sentence end like that. The final wall is puzzled by your actions. The final wall is asking you, wasn't this the story you wanted? I didn't want it. Who would want a conclusion like this? Stop. I said, stop that right now. The Dakibi king persistently chased after us, fables dripping from all over his body. Thick murderous aura was filling up his eyes. You must not touch the wall. You'll regret it. There is nothing beyond this wall. Not even what you wished for, not even what you wanted to see. He was wrong. The most ancient dream was beyond this wall. Weni King. The Weni King hiding within my shadow imprisoned the Dakibi King's body. Finally, we meet again, my old friend. The Weni King. Go on ahead, Kim Dokja. Fulfill our agreement. I didn't let go of the sentence still in my hand. The blades flying in at the necks of the great sage and Uriel, W. While grabbing hold of that W, I prevented the next vowel from generating. Along with pushushuk, noise, my fingers were sliced off. Fables leaking out non-stop, screamed out. You are not the Dakibi King. You cannot stop the progress of the applicable fable. It was then, something soft enveloped the back of my hand accompanied by the ba-ot noise. With every ounce of her energy she could summon, Bu rubbed her whole body against that sentence as if she had become an eraser. The storyteller had sided with Dokja / the reader. Along with Bu, I smacked down on the sentence with everything I got, over and over again. I swung my fist at the unstoppable sentence, then even stabbed it with my sword. Please, please, please. And eventually, very faintly, cracks were developing on the letters. The already written sentences were scattering away. The conclusion was changing. Tabades flyin in at TENEC of great and URL. The broken words initiated a storm of powerful sparks, before transforming into something I couldn't read at all. Blade you are sage. Uhud dash. Countless outer gods held out. Their cries even sounded reverential as if they were exalting a great god. I held my hand that bled fables non-stop, and witnessed the wall's surface changing. Shin Yu-sung had come closer without me realizing it to tightly hold my hand. A juicy. You have acquired a new great fable. Great fable, one who breaks the final wall, has been acquired. Great fable, one who breaks the final wall, is continuing on with its storytelling. Starstream is seeing you off on your journey. As the messages exploded inside my head, the wall before our eyes collapsed. The fables written on the wall and our own were now getting all jumbled up. Countless S were spinning around in sync. And that made them resemble circles. And just beyond those pitch-black circles, I thought I could see something. Ha 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 ha. This is it. As per our agreement, I shall be the first one to confirm what's beyond the final wall. The Weni King shoved the Dakibi King aside and jumped right into the black circle. And as the latter began crying in despair, the blade of dark heavenly demon sword pierced his throat cleanly. My companions ran up to me. Everything in this world was crumbling down. The final wall, the star stream, everything was collapsing. The broken wall was getting jumbled up with the companions' fables. It became gradually impossible to tell apart what was a fable and what was reality. Something beyond the circle was looking at this side. I too stared right back at it. Just what is that? Little by little, it became harder to breathe. Something was sucking me in. Everything I experienced, felt, and judged were now streaming above the final wall in sloppy, broken sentences. Every one. I couldn't figure out whether I was saying that or the wall was. I was now simply a description on that wall. Some sentences could only be seen faintly, while some others couldn't be seen at all. Eventually, all the flowing sentences began disappearing one at a time. Slowly, so agonizingly slowly. Just like that, every sentence above the wall came to a st.